Hello, sir. A very good morning. Sajid
Good
this side.
morning.
How
Yes,
are you,
yes.
sir?
Good morning. Fine. How are you?
I'm also good, sir. Happy Teachers' Day
Thank you.
to you.
Same to you. Same to
Thank
you.
Good
Same to
morning,
you.
sir. Vishnu
Good
here
morning.
from
Good morning.
Delhi.
Good morning, Vishnuji. How are you?
All cool, sir. Happy
Nice.
Teachers' Day.
Thank you. Same to you, Vishnuji.
Morning, sir. This is Anand.
Thank
Happy
you, sir.
Teachers' Day.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, Dr. Anand.
Yes, sir. Good morning, sir. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Yes. Good morning.
Morning,
Good
sir.
morning, sir.
Good morning. Very good morning. Thank you. Am I audible, Sajid?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir, you
Yes,
are
sir. You are
audible.
audible.
Voice is clear?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
All clear. Sir. And your video is also good, sir.
Okay. You can join from laptop.
Okay, okay. Nice, nice. Actually, via laptop, it gives a landscape view. So
Yeah,
a
yeah.
big view it gives.
Yes. Yes. So how many people are there?
Still joining, sir. They're still joining.
In the post afternoon also we have some.
Yes, sir. By Center for Arbitration.
Before that I have a GC.
Okay. Of some other university.
No, our consortium.
Okay, okay.
Consortiums.
We will start. Sir, we will start.
Still 1 minute is there. Let
Since
people
you
join.
already said, yeah.
Let people join. Sure.
Can we start now, sir?
Yeah, please.
Subhangan?
So can we start?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, sir. Good morning. We at the Justice ML Penze NYT Mumbai welcome our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Sir Professor Dr. Dilip Uke, our respected Registrar, Dr. Anil G. Warrier, the eminent panelists, and of course, the participants to the panel discussion on the eco-sensitive Western Ghats and environment, revisiting the Gadgil Committee report. Before we begin, I would like to give a brief introduction for our viewers who don't have a big idea about our topic. The Western Ghat is an extensive region spanning over 6 states, 44 districts, and 142 talukas. It is a home to many endangered plants and wildlife. The forested hills in the Western Ghats are sourcing to numerous rivers, which includes the Godavari, Krishna, and Kaveri, which in turn supplies water to 6 states in the Western Ghats. The Ministry of Environment and Forests in India appointed the Western Ghats Ecology Expert Panel. The panel, which is also known as an Environmental Research Commission, who assessed and gave recommendations, following which they submitted a report to the Government of India in 2011. In its recommendation, the panel recommended a national level authority, which is the Western Ghats Ecology Authority. And the report was submitted, which was considered by UNESCO, which added 39 serial sites of the Western Ghats on the World Heritage List. Around 64% of the Western Ghats region was declared as ecologically sensitive area. As the first online event of our chair, I would like to tell you a bit about our university. Maharashtra National Law University, Mumbai was established under the Maharashtra National Law University Act of 2014. Our first batch has graduated this year, even during the hardships of the pandemic. The Mr. Justice M.L. Penze Foundation had established an environmental law chair in our university to promote worldwide awareness of environmental preservation due to the threat that human activities pose to nature. In pursuance of our goal, we have organized this panel discussion. Also, I would like to inform all the participants, if they have any questions, they can send them through the chat box below their screen, and they will be addressed at the end of the session based on the time we have. Professor Anil G. Warrier, the Chair Professor of Justice M.L. Penze Environmental Law Chair, has been with the university since its inception from 2015. He was later appointed as the Officer of Special Duty. Since 2019, he is appointed as Professor and Director of Center for Research in Criminal Justice and Controller of Examination. This year, we are happy to share that Sir has been elevated to the Registrar of our university. With this, Sir, I would request you to please give the welcome address to our participants and the panelists.
Thank you, Shivankar.
Welcome.
Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Uke sir, respected panelists and the participants. It's a pleasure to welcome you all to this panel discussion, because the panel discussion, the subject of the panel discussion is very relevant today. And it is also a matter of pleasure that most of the participants and the panelists and the organizers are one way or other connected with the Western Ghats. So the subject is right close to our heart. And this, as the moderator himself has told, the M.L. Penze Foundation, Justice M.L. Penze Foundation has established this chair, environmental chair in the Maharashtra National Law University. And we have started the functioning of the chair formally with a national seminar, which was inaugurated by Honorable Mr. Justice Swatandra Kumar. And that was on environmental concerns and complaints. So we had a lot of, and there were some other, a few programs also arranged by the students, organized by the students under the banner of the chair. But unfortunately, we have planned some programs, but unfortunately the pandemic has come and there was lockdown. So our Vice Chancellor has suggested that you should do some seminars or webinars under the banner of the chair. And we thought that we will initiate a series of discussions. And as of now, what we can do is only a series of discussions. So outreach activities have some limitations now. So then we were thinking of to start with what subject. Then the subject came into our mind that this Western Ghats and revisiting the Gargi Committee report. Because Gargi Committee report had been a subject of heated discussion for the last few years. And I would like to share with you that even Professor Madhav Gadgil himself was to take part in this webinar. He had consented to be a part of us, but unfortunately, due to some health issues, he could not make it today. But he will be joining further discussions on some other day. So I do not want to elaborate because I know that you are all so eager to listen to the panelists. And I just once again welcome you all, our Vice Chancellor, the panelists, 3 panelists over here, and all the participants. We have participants in different parts, and other faculties from other universities and colleges have also joined, and people from industry have joined, apart from the students of MNLU and other students. So I welcome everyone formally to this session, and thank you for taking out time, especially on a Sunday like this. And I also take this opportunity to wish you all a happy Teachers' Day. Thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you very much, sir, for addressing us in today's panel discussion. And as the representative of the chair, our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Sir Professor Dilip OK, has an excellency in Constitution Law, Jurisprudence, and Human Rights Law. His work has also been recognized by Honorable Justice Krishna Iyer. Last year, Sir received an award from the Indian National Bar Association as the Best Academician. Under his guidance, the university has also launched a master's course in mediation, which I'm proud to say is the first master's course in mediation in the country. Sir has been supportive of our initiatives and events that the chair is conducting, and we would like to thank him for all this support. Sir, I request you to please give the opening remarks for today's session.
Thank you, Mr. Shubhankar. The esteemed panelist of today's discussion, our Chair Professor of ML Pendency Chair and in charge registrar, Professor Anil Variyat, all my colleagues, other colleagues, and dear participants. At the outset, I wish all of you a very happy Teachers' Day. As well, I congratulate Professor Variyat sir for having organized this panel discussion on much of the relevant and important topic, which is pertaining to ecology, environment. As Mr. Shubhankar had pointed out, that Maharashtra National University, Mumbai, which was established in 2015, the first batch has been graduated this year, passed out recently in the month of June, July. Apart from the regular BA LLB honors course, we offer even regular LLM of 1 year with diverse specializations. Similarly, we have almost 10 centers along with the chair, like mediation, arbitration, criminal justice, so on and so forth. Wherein from this year, we have launched not only master's program in mediation as pointed out by Mr. Shubhankar, and I wish to modify it a bit. Maharashtra National Law University, Mumbai is not the only university in the country which has started and offered the master's program in mediation, but rather it is the only university in the whole Asia which is offering a master's program in mediation. Along with the master's program in mediation, another master's, that is LLM, which were launched in association with the SEBI, Security and Exchange Board, Government of India, and its institute, National Institute of Security Management, NISM. That is LLM exclusively in investment and security laws. Rather, 400 applicants had applied for that, conducted the entrance test, and conducted even a personal interviews, and 60 candidates have been selected, and course is now rolled on. That is another course, another master's course. Third master course which we have launched is LLM Professional from this academic year. Already classes are going on. Those who have graduated in law, but either in practice or in judiciary or in administration or some other service or business, who are unable to pursue their masters in law. So for such professionals, we have launched even LLM Professional course from this academic year. So these are the 3 master's courses which we have launched from this academic year. The nutshell is that, crux is that the pandemic did not deter our spirit and enthusiasm. We are going ahead with all our regular activities. As Professor Varyat sir has pointed out that, and Mr. Shubhankar also, that this chair has been established, Justice M.L. Pentse chair has been established by Mr. Justice M.L. Pentse Foundation. It was just a sheer coincidence that in the March, rather precisely on 30th of March 2019, there was an advisory committee meeting convened in our university. And at the end of the meeting, when I was thanking all those people, I happened to make an appeal that this university is nascent one, new one. We need your wishes and support as well as generosity. So I appeal to all of you to either create chairs or endowments or sponsorships, so on and so forth. And coincidentally, senior lawyer who has been designated as senior advocate Nitin Thakkarji, who was there present. He had interacted with me and he inquired about what is this kind of the things which we can do. And with this 2 minutes discussion, matter went further, and rather Justice M.L. Pentse Foundation has created the chair in his name, Justice M.L. Pentse Chair in Environmental Law. And then onwards, we have entrusted the task to Mr. Varyat, Professor Varyat, to look after the activities of chair. The aims and objects of the chair is primarily to carry out certain research projects in relation to environment, as well as training programs in association with other institutions like, say, Maharashtra Pollution Control Board and other bodies, other organizations, NGOs, as well as to organize seminars, webinars, discussions, so on and so forth. It was rather inaugurated by Satendra Kumar, former Chief Justice, Bombay High Court, and then Judge, Supreme Court of India. Dear colleagues, dear friends, definitely panelists and experts are going to discuss about this issue. As now in this time we are facing the issue of environmental pollution. I do not want to go at length about it. Laws are there, legislations are there, rules, bylaws are there, Environmental Protection Act or the Water Pollution Prevention Act or Forest Conservation Act, so on and so forth, including even international instruments which are there. Either we rely upon the Kyoto Protocol or Paris Principles, so on and so forth. And wherein even the judiciary, particularly higher judiciary, and that too, the Indian Supreme Court has contributed so much in the realm of environmental protection, the ecology, as we know, the greenhouse gases, the carbon emission, now the carbon credits, so on and so forth, the tussle between developed and developing countries, wherein the topic which was selected for today's discussion assumes more significance because it is because of the Western Ghats. We do receive, particularly Maharashtra and this region does receive the rains. Of course, there are other factors also responsible too, but it is the Western Ghat. It is that important. Along with that, the flora and fauna which are there. So ecology which is to be preserved. Mr. Madhav Gadgil, who has worked upon it, an expert in water resources primarily, a former secretary of the government of India, who could have had otherwise joined, but because of certain things, certain reasons, he could not. In view of this, the discussions assumes more significance. As I said that there are series of decisions delivered by the Indian Supreme Court, MC Mehta, series of MC Mehtas for environmental protection, ecology, so on and so forth. And there are so many other cases. Rather now the Green Tribunal which has been created to deal with the issues in relation to environmental. Rather, there was a bench which was called as a Green Bench, headed by Justice Kuldeep Singh, still I remember. That bench was to assign the task about the matters pertaining to environment as such, or seashores, several such as. Hence, the endeavors of our university, Maharashtra National Law University, Mumbai, are the same, that whatever we can contribute in the social development, environmental protection is nothing but the social development, human development, and thereby the chair which was created by Justice M.L. Pendse chair, M.L. Pendse Foundation, and particularly Advocate Nitin J. Thakkar, we sincerely thank him as well as M.L. Pendse Foundation for having created the chair, and I wish that many more such activities like our car shed and other things, tree cuttings, there are several environmental issues in Mumbai existing right now. Also, every rainy season, Mumbai does witness the kind of chaos. So this chair, M.L. Pendse chair, would contribute certain things by conducting such activities. And I thank all the panelists and participants for having joined today's discussion, and wish you all the best for the further transactions. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir, for your remarks. It indeed has set the tone for today's session. Before we begin, I would like to give a brief introduction of the panelists. Advocate Harish Vasudevan is a practicing lawyer in the High Court of Kerala and the National Green Tribunal in Chennai. He has been bestowed with awards such as the Kirti Mudra Award and also the RIFA Environmental Award for his contributions for protecting the Western Ghats. He has also succeeded in protecting 500 hectares of wetlands in Aranmula through litigation. Sir has also edited a popular book on sustainable land use policy. He has also been the recipient of international scholarships in the field of environmental law. Dr. Vishnu Konurayar is an associate professor and head of department law at the TERI School of Advanced Studies in New Delhi. Earlier, he had served to the Indian Law Institute, New Delhi, as an assistant professor. He has also served the Max Planck Institute for European Legal History in Frankfurt as a postdoctoral researcher and at NUJS as a lecturer. His research and teaching interests are in environmental law and policy, access to justice initiatives, informal dispute resolution systems, and online dispute resolution systems. Dr. Anant Chinchure is currently a faculty of law at the Central University of Karnataka. Sir has over 14 years of experience in teaching at both undergraduate and postgraduate levels. Many may also recognize Sir from his articles which have been published at reputed journals and from paper presentations both at national and international symposiums. We thank you all for have taken the time out on a Saturday morning, and I'm sure the audience is looking forward to an engaging discussion. Dr. Konurayar, if I may request you to get the ball rolling by sharing with us your views on the recommendations made by the Gadgil committee in light of the importance of the Western Ghats. What, according to you, would be the reason for its non-implementation or its failure in implementing the research carried out by this committee?
Thank you, Shubhankar. Thank you so much.
Welcome, sir.
Yeah. So, as Shubhankar introduced, my name is Vishnu, and currently I'm associated with Terry School of Advanced Studies, New Delhi. And before that, I was with Max Planck and the Indian Law Institute. And thank you, Professor Dilip sir, the Vice Chancellor of MNLU, and Professor Anil Variath, the Registrar, and all the organizers and the co-panelists. Of course, I've been watching Advocate Harish Vasudevan. He's a real expert in these subjects. So I consider this as an opportunity to learn in more depth about the subject. And I would also enjoy the company of Dr. Anand Chinchure and all the other experts and all the other participants of this webinar, this panel discussion. And as you all know, the Western Ghats is a sensitive biodiversity hotspot. And as Shubhankar rightly pointed out, it has been identified by UNESCO as one of the World Heritage Sites. And it extends throughout the west coast of India. I would say, like from River Tapti in Gujarat to in the southernmost tip to Kanyakumari, almost for 1,600 kilometers. That is the length of the Western Ghat. It covers the average width of Western Ghats would be, I would say, somewhere around 500 to 600 kilometers. And the height, the average height would be, the average width would be around 100 kilometers. And the average height would be somewhere around 600 meters from the sea level. And of course, then we have the highest, the peaks like Anamudi, which is around 2,700, to be precise, 2,695 meters from the sea level. And the Western Ghats, it covers almost 1,60,000. There are different data available. Some of them say somewhere around 1,26,000 square kilometers. Some of them say, even Gadgil committee report, I guess it says 1,60,000 square kilometers. And I also read a few materials which says that it covers around 1,80,000 square kilometers. Because it is basically geospatial technology is used for calculating the area. And very often they confuse the forest, the green canopy as part of the entire green canopy as part of the Western Ghats and the forest cover. Anyway, the general, the consensus is that somewhere around 1,60,000 square kilometers is being covered by the Western Ghats. That is almost coming around 6% of the total land mass of India, the land area of India. And as Shubhankar rightly pointed out, it almost the Western Ghats includes almost precisely six states: Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Maharashtra, Goa, and Gujarat, and one union territory, Dadra and Nagar Haveli. And as the Gadgil committee, Dr. Madhav Gadgil himself pointed out in his report, the region has the highest levels of literacy when compared to the other parts of India. It has got the highest levels of literacy. And maybe because of this literacy, it has got the highest level of environmental awareness. Somehow people feel like, they have to protect the environment. they are aware of the threats of global change, climate change and global warming. Unlike maybe the few other parts of India. And the Madhav Gadgil Committee also specifically emphasized on the point that the democratic institutions or the importance of democracy is deeply entrenched in most of the states. Again, he says, I would say, when compared to the other states in India. For example, Madhav Gadgil specifically used the example of Kerala. He says, Kerala leads the country in capacity building and empowering of Panchayati Raj institutions. And later on in the report, he says that the involvement of participatory democracy and discussion and deliberation with Gram Sabhas and the civil society is the crux of implementing this report, his recommendations. And as Shubhankar asked me to do, like why Western Ghat? What is the importance of Western Ghat? And firstly, it is important due to the hydrological and watershed functions. There are many rivers that originates in Western Ghats and flows towards west and flows towards east. That includes including Godavari, Kaveri, Krishna. In Kerala, you have rivers like Pamba or Nila. There are, again, I have gone through literature which says that the Western Ghats is directly, it helps almost 3 crores of Indian people who are living in that area for getting the water supply, for drinking, and as well as the other uses. And the region also has the socio-cultural importance. There are many tribal, the original forest dwellers living in these areas, in the forest in Western Ghats, who are spiritually connected with nature. So I would say that when any interaction with Western Ghats should also consider these tribal people, these people who are living inside the forest or maybe adjacent to the forest. And when we speak about the cultural importance, there are many pilgrimage centers, including Sabarimala or including the Mahabaleshwar temple in Maharashtra. Then, of course, climate, it is also important for climate reasons and the reasons of climate change. As you know, I would say that the entire climate specifically in South India and throughout India is dependent on Western Ghats. And Western Ghats, the forest cover in Western Ghats, it almost neutralizes around 4 million tons of carbon every year. That is almost 10% of the emissions that is neutralized by the Indian forest. Again, I'll be quick. The Ghats, it is also a biodiversity hotspot. Maybe I would say that one of the 8 biodiversity hotspots, global hotspots. And I mean, it has diverse flora and fauna. And I have also gone through some of the literature which says that out of the 3,500 medicinal plants that exist in India, almost 700, 800, at least existing to current knowledge, almost 700 to 800 of those medicinal plants can be found in Western Ghats. And according to the IUCN RED data, at least 325 of globally threatened species of the plants, they also live in plants, flora and fauna, they occur in the Western Ghats. And Western Ghats also has its economic significance. It is a mineral rich area, especially, I mean, you know that yeah, all of us have gone through the Goa Foundation cases, and is specifically related to the mining and the corrupt practices, the unethical practices relating to mining. and to what extent the concerns of environment has been neglected by the mining industry in Goa. So again, it's not just Goa. Like in Karnataka, in southern Karnataka, we have iron ores, iron mines like Kudremukh. So it has got the presence of iron, manganese, and bauxite ores in the category of major minerals. And in the category of minor minerals, best example would be Kerala, where river sand is being exploited without any logic. And it is also like the home to the celebrated species of spices, the precise reason for which the Western powers colonized us, including cardamom or including the pepper. And it also is the home to large plantations and maybe, I mean, special fragrant varieties of tea, coffee, etc. And maybe in India, it is also home to the large plantations of natural rubber. So it has got economic importance. And please also take note of the presence of tourism industry in the Western Ghats, throughout the Western Ghats. Another point is that Western Ghats also accommodates the highest human population. That is more than 300 persons per square kilometer, which is the highest among all global hotspots. Now, Madhav Gadgil Committee, as well as I mean, our former speakers have rightly pointed out the aspects of sustainable development. Now, as all of us know, the sustainable development or the idea of sustainable development has three pillars: the economic development, and the protection of the ecosystem or the environment, and thirdly, taking care of the social equity or the fairness of various stakeholders among our population. Every question or any question relating to development and environment has to take care of these three pillars, these three broad concerns. And that is exactly what Dr. Gadgil was trying to do when he wrote his report, or when the committee wrote this report. They have taken care of very many challenges that exist in the Western Ghats, which include the unplanned carrot mining in the region. I don't think I need to explain about the Goa Foundation case. All of us have gone through the case. And another example would be the uncontrolled sand mining. The rivers of Kerala are totally devastated because of the sand mining. Such corrupt practices, of course, affects the right to life of millions of people. Just remember, among all the global hotspots, the Western Ghats has the highest population rate. So it affects the right to life of millions of people living in the region. And I emphasize on right to life because it is, I mean, in Kerala, recently there has been, for the last 3 years, we are witnessing continuous floods and landslides, and we are losing many lives. I mean, I believe that it has got, and it is the impact of whatever has been happening in the Western Ghats in the past. Another serious issue is the existence of the hydropower projects and large dams in the area, and also proposals to construct new dams in the area. And there are many dams. We have a dam that was built somewhere during 1870s, the Mullaperiyar Dam, as well as there are plans to construct a dam in Adirapalli, across the Adirapalli waterfalls, the Adirapalli waterfall is famous for the Bahubali movies, like the same waterfall that we watched in the movies. Now, Madhav Gadgil committee report specifically says that, with specific reference to Mullaperia Dam, it says that the dams must be decommissioned, of course, gradually, as and when it finishes its lifespan. Every dam has got a lifespan. So as and when it finishes its lifespan, it should be decommissioned. That is one of the recommendations of Madhav Gadgil committee report with reference to this aspect. Now, this region also has the highest densities of livestock. Of course, livestock and the presence of this livestock impacts the environment and ecosystem in the Western Ghat region, because people are not aware of how it is going to impact. The grazing of this livestock is going to impact the ecosystem. And of course, then fragmentation of the ecosystem is also caused by deforestation, plantations, and encroachment by human settlements for multiple reasons, pollution caused by, I would say, unrestricted use of agrochemicals in the plantations. And we have the best example. I come from the northernmost district of Kerala, Kasaragod. And there was an instance where the Plantation Corporation of Kerala had aerially sprayed endosulfan in cashew plantations, and how it impacted the lives and lives of people who are living there, and how it impacted the other forms of flora and fauna. There are many literature available on that issue. So these are some of the challenges that we face. And some of these challenges were considered by Professor Gadgil. And as a consequence of these challenges, there are increasing instances of human-wildlife conflict. Some of you might remember about an instance that happened 3 months ago in Kerala, where a wild animal was killed by the local people. I think somewhere in May or April. Again, it also would impact India's fight against, or maybe the fight of the human race against climate change. And because I told you, like, it is the forest is a natural sink that would absorb carbon emission. So as and when forest cover disappears, it also affects our fight against climate change. Now, if the host can help me, allow me to share a screen. Now it is currently disabled, or maybe I can share it later also. Like, I would like to take the deforestation as an example. To what extent deforestation had happened or is happening in the Western Ghat region. So maybe I can do it at a later stage. So coming specifically to Madhav Gadgil committee report, it classifies the Western Ghat region. Of course, the entire Western Ghat region is eco-sensitive areas, and it classifies the area into ecologically sensitive zone 1, that is regions of highest sensitivity, where regions of highest sensitivity, and then the Gadgil committee report also classifies the Western Ghats as the ESZ 2, which is like regions of high sensitivity. Then regions of moderate sensitivity are classified as ESZ 3. Then it would be parks and the other protected area that has been created by the Wildlife Protection Act or the other statutes. Now, coming to the recommendation. Somehow, I feel that though Madhava Gadgil committee report itself says that the people of the region are highly literate and they are aware about the environmental, they are aware about the environmental concerns. Somehow, I feel that the people in the locality or in this region are have grossly misunderstood the Gadgil committee report. If we look at the report, it doesn't say that the people should be evacuated from their homes or from their property. Generally, the report says that in ecologically sensitive zone 1, there has to be no new dams, and even those dams whose life has life has come to an end has to be decommissioned. So in eco-sensitive zone 1, no new dams, and in eco-sensitive zone 1 and 2, the Madhav Gadgil committee report recommended that there has to be an indefinite moratorium on new environmental clearances for mining. It also recommended that the phasing out of mining in ecologically sensitive areas, zone 1, by the year 2016. The report came in the year 2011, and that's what the committee recommended. Authority as a statutory authority under the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Okay, then the word climate change was not there in the ministry's name. And a bottom to top approach, like in the decision making, in the governance on issues relating to Western Ghats. Like the Gram Sabha or the civil society or the local people must be consulted before implementing this report. Somehow this report has been grossly misunderstood. And if we go through the relevant chapter, that is Madhav Gadgil committee report in table 6 clearly indicates what are the things that the committee recommends in ESZ 1, ESZ 2, and ESZ 3. Nowhere the Madhav Gadgil committee report says that the people has to be evacuated. Somehow that was the message given by the political parties, maybe when the election was approaching earlier, immediately after, during 2011 and 2014. And yeah, maybe I can come back later. So these are some of the points that I would like to tell the audience. It is basically because of the vote bank politics that exist in India, the correct practice that exists in the governance structure that we have in India. The Gadgil committee report has not been implemented, and a new committee was constituted. And of course, now because of the recent incidents, there is another demand from the various stakeholders for revisiting the Madhav Gadgil committee report. I also feel that this demand for revisiting the Gadgil committee report must be read along with the global change in the jurisprudence relating to the environment or environmental law and philosophy. Gradually, there is, the lawmaking agencies, including the parliament in some of the countries, or maybe the judiciary in different countries, have been, going back to the deep ecology approach, which is in contradiction with the anthropocentric approach to of environmental jurisprudence. And of course, I would say that from India also we have one example from the Uttarakhand High Court, where river Ganga was held to be a person. But of course, that was a grossly misunderstood judgment from the court. But from the other countries, we have examples from we have an example from New Zealand, where a river has been, through a statute, has been declared as a person. So I think we need to interpret the demand for revisiting the Madhav Gadgil Committee report and the importance of protecting the Western Ghats, from a totally new jurisprudence, a jurisprudence that is away from the anthropocentric approach, a jurisprudence that is founded on the so-called deep ecology approach. So thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you very much, sir, for that. I truly agree with your point on the importance of the Western Ghats in terms of how it is, it provides life to people, its medicinal uses and its mineral uses. Thank you very much for that. Moving on, Mr. Vasudev, could you please share with us your perspective on the effectiveness of law in protecting the eco-sensitivity of the Western Ghats?
Thank you, Shubhankar.
You're welcome, sir.
Thank you for this invitation, Dr. Anil, and thank you, my colleague, who have made an excellent speech, Dr. Vishnu, and thank you other panelists and other members who are other dignitaries who are in the panelists and in the, as attendees. As a lawyer, and as a person who lives in the Western Ghats, I personally believe that the legal instrument alone cannot save Western Ghats or any environment for that matter. Starting from the 1972, the famous speech of Indira Gandhi in the Stockholm Convention about the deep relation between the environmental protection and poverty. I think we should go back to the same speech and we should restart from there. There was a perspective for the state why the environment should be protected. I seriously believe that such a mission, such a vision is lacking now. How many of our, forget about the leaders, how many of our political parties are having such a vision? How many of our national leaders are having such a vision for why we should protect our environment? I think environmental protection is seen as a curse, as a barrier or hurdle against development. When people go to Malaysia or other countries, they say that any construction is possible within the coastal area, so why you are objecting in India? When they see other countries with the tourism in the hilly areas, they may ask us, why you need to restrict certain activities in Western Ghats? The entire answers are available in the Madhav Gadgil Committee report, Expert Ecology Panel Committee report. I am seeing that report as a legal instrument for the practical protection of Western Ghats. There was a campaign going on for the protection of Western Ghats for the last 35-40 years. Save Western Ghats movement started in 1970s. I don't know how many of you have heard about this. That Save Western Ghats is a people's movement. It was not a government initiative. It was not an NGO initiative. It was a purely people's initiative started from Maharashtra towards Tamil Nadu. They have traveled across the Western Ghats. They have met people, they have met villagers, farmers, and all people who are living in the Western Ghats, and to educate them about the importance of Western Ghats and to learn from them what are the people's initiative in each area in protecting the micro watersheds, in protecting the animal habitat, and in protecting the forest areas from being inhabited. So those studies, people-based studies, are reflected in the Western Ghats Ecology Expert Panel Committee report. From the legal perspective, the first legal instrument for identifying eco-sensitive zones, we must understand the scheme of the Environment Protection Act. The Act says, Section 3 says the environment should be protected and improved. We are only talking about protection, no improvement. The word improvement is also a part of the constitutional mandate and also a part of the Section 3 of the Environment Protection Act. When Section 3 is a legal mandate, it is no more a question of fundamental right of any citizen, but it is a legal duty, a statutory duty of a state. You must be knowing, as legal students, you must be knowing the difference between a constitutional right and a statutory right. The right to information was a constitutional right till Right to Information Act was passed. It was a constitutional right of every citizen to get information, but it was practically not possible to get information. When it became a statutory right, the corresponding statutory duty has made it mandatory to disclose something at a particular period in a particular way, without which they will be penalized. So when environmental protection has become a statutory duty of the state, as Section 3 and Section 5 imposes a duty on the state to protect the environment, even though the word used is may in the Section 3 and Section 5. The Honorable Supreme Court has defined it, saying that this is not a mere provision for protecting the environment, but it's a statutory duty of the central government. So under Section 3, there is a mandate. That mandate says you have to identify the ecological sensitive areas in the country and to have a separate legal regime for that area. For separate legal regime and separate administrative mechanism, ecological sensitive areas should be identified. Till 2000, there was no criteria prescribed by any of the governments as to how the environmental sensitivity of an area is to be determined. There comes the Pranab Committee report. 2000, in the year 2000, the Pranab Committee report came, and the Pranab, the then advisor of the government, he was a part of the planning board. He was a well educated, scientific person who tried to interpret what is ecological sensitivity. And under the Environment Protection Act, there is only one legal instrument which helps the government to identify the ecological sensitivity of an area, that is Pranab Committee report. Pranab says he made certain observations and he conducted a lot of research in the already existing available literature, and he got into a conclusion that the altitude of an area, the presence of originating a river, the presence of protected areas or wildlife sanctuaries, or endemicism of a particular flora or fauna, biodiversity richness, and other criteria. He laid down less than 10 criteria to identify whether a particular area is ecologically sensitive or not. By that report, the central government has accepted that report in 2000, and as on today, we are having only one criteria for ecological sensitive area to be determined, that is Pranab Committee report. The Gadgil Committee was asked to identify the Western Ghats areas on the basis of Pranab Committee report. So the criteria was not laid down by the Madhava Gadgil committee report, but it was a mandate for the committee to identify the area based on Pranab Sen committee report. Now people are opposing the committee report, saying that the criteria was wrong. The central government has refixed its criteria through another committee, that is a Kasturirangan committee, and state of Kerala has again diluted it by some other committee called Women Women Committee, and none of these persons have even seen the Pranab Sen committee report. State of Kerala or any of its offices like Environment Department or Biodiversity Department do not even have a copy of the Pranab Sen committee report. So without even seeing a copy of the criteria laid down for the identification of ecological sensitive areas in Western Ghats, we are now going to protect the Western Ghats as eco-sensitive areas. So the identification was based on Pranab Sen committee report. The Western Ghats committee report made a elaborated suggestions, like they classified the entire Western Ghats into three. They identified that the entire Western Ghats area is ecologically sensitive if Pranab Sen committee criteria is followed. So there is no wrong. The first issue was to identify these areas. Now, people who are objecting the Western Ghats committee report, they have not objected that this criteria is wrong. Nobody has challenged this criteria at all. Even today, nobody has even challenged. There is no pending litigation before any of the courts in India challenging the criteria laid out by Pranab Sen. There is no court cases challenging the criteria followed by Gadgil report. They also admit that the entire Western Ghats is ecologically sensitive. We should see Western Ghats as a single unit, not as a discrete areas where it is protected under protected areas or wildlife sanctuaries or tiger habitats. So this legal methodology for identification of eco-sensitive areas in Western Ghats has thoroughly failed. When a scientific assessment was done, it was ignored totally on not on legal merits, not on scientific merits, but on political terms. I repeat, the political terms dictated by the political entities, either left parties or Congress party or any other party for that matter, they have not even seen the criteria. They have not even followed the criteria. They have no challenge against the criteria followed by the committee also. They have not said that the Western Ghats committee have mistaken in following the criteria. No, there is no such allegation against them. Now, Western Ghats committee suggested three recommendations, mainly three recommendations. One is identification of eco-sensitive areas. Second thing is what is the future administrative mechanism to be followed. The Western Ghats committee suggested a separate entity for the management of Western Ghats area through district level committees, state level authority and central authority. This district level authorities, district Western Ghats authority is a combination of local people, including tribals, farmers and other department officials. Gadgil was totally against the centricism of conservation. He was equally against imposing development projects from top to bottom, like conservation is coming from Delhi to the rural areas of this country. He was totally against it. He was saying all along in his report that the entire mission of protection of Western Ghats failed because of the centric approach, the official approach in protecting the area without acknowledging the rights of the people. So the people-centric approach was defeated by the community heads, the political heads. I seriously believe that it is democratizing the natural wealth on public management. This idea of public management of natural resources will be opposed by the persons who are in power. Ministry of Environment and Forest is having a clash of interest in this matter. I have never seen a report stating this point, this legal point, that when power is directed to be decentralized, will the ministry accept it? I think why Western Ghats report has failed, this is one of the best reasons known to me. The Goa Foundation report, the case revealed that more than 18,000 crore, more than 25,000 crore worth iron ore mining, illegal mining had happened in Goa. The Shah Commission report was revealing a huge threatening fact. Ministry of Environment and Forest, even today, did not impose such penalties on the polluters. They did not even collected those funds in the public interest. What I'm saying is that the decentralized approach in protection of Western Ghats was the self-destructing idea of the report. Only because of that idea, the Ministry of Environment was totally against the report, and the states have opposed the report because neither the state nor the central government want to dilute their powers into the people's hands, into the tribal hands. The Kasturirangan committee was appointed to look whether the remedies and recommendations of the committee can be fruitfully implemented or not. If you see the terms of reference of the Kasturirangan committee report, it is very interesting. It is not to relook the report, it is to implement the Western Ghats report that second committee has come. Instead of going by the terms of reference, the Kasturirangan went in saying that the power is given to the local people is not needed. For the protection of Western Ghats, the power should be centralized. And what is the role of this illiterate tribals to manage their areas, to decide the law of that area? He even said so. So it was basically against the 92nd and 93rd, 73rd and 74th constitutional amendments. He actually, the spirit of the Kasturirangan committee report was to sabotage the decentralized approach of environmental protection. And secondly, the power of giving environmental clearances in the central government, either with the central government or with the state government, will be taken away if the Western Ghats authorities have come in the district level, including with the participation of the local people. So that also triggered a lot of conflict of interest between the persons who are in power and the recommendations of the committee. I think that made a serious problem with the implementation of the report. The third one is that the total prohibition for mining. I seriously believe that the mining industry is so powerful. Mining industry is not only the industry who is now running, but if I am interested in starting a mining industry, and I have invested in the Western Ghats area in land by purchasing land, therefore I will spend enough money to sabotage this report. That is why even after 3 or 4 months of the committee report, the report did not come online. The report was not published, but one Krishnan from Kerala went up to the Information Commission and obtained an order in favor of from the Delhi High Court to at least to read the report of the Madhav Gadgil. So I am concluding my point saying that the hue and cry in the local areas of Kerala, the triggering point was the church. The triggering point was the local, the industrial groups. More than 10,000 illegal land assignments were obtained in the state of Kerala. In Idukki alone, we have identified the case of One Earth, One Life before the Honorable Supreme Court. The Honorable Empowered Committee of the Supreme Court have identified persons who are not born have obtained pattas for government land, forest land, for non-forest purposes like mining. Now, you cannot imagine the value of the government land which is appropriated in the state of Idukki, in the state of Kerala, in the district of Idukki alone. It's worth more than 10,000 crore rupees. The mineral reserve is more than lakh crore rupees. The land value itself is in terms of crores. So all this will have an end when the Madhav Gadgil committee report is implemented. He says no further deforestation. He says no further settlement. The existing settlers can continue. He was not against the development. He says the existing settlers can continue. He says the existing settlers can even use the resources like mining resources for their own natural use. In the zone 2, he permitted mining to the extent for local administration and local other needed. It was basically a earth-centric approach of environmental protection. He says the need should be reduced. The one single line recommendation of having a environmental sustainable green building code was totally neglected. Now, I was a part of the UNDP committee which studied about the floods, Kerala floods, and we came with a beautiful report of the disaster, the PDNA, post-disaster need assessment of Kerala. Kerala government, cabinet have accepted the report of PDNA. This report says the entire Western Ghats should be protected in a better way. In what way? It says there is no land use plan, there is no land use policy, there is no people-centric approach. Everything should be brought back. This is what Gadgil said. We should have a hill area friendly building code, which reduces the amount of sand, which it reduces the amount of other building materials. We are not following it. We have banned plastic after 8 years of the Gadgil report, but we are too late to understand the value of that report. I also suggest that there was the fourth point, the last point, there was no proper communication when the Gadgil report was in preparation. In Maharashtra, I think Dr. Madhav Gadgil himself made an attempt to communicate with local people, to interact with local people. In Kerala, no such effort was done. Kerala State Biodiversity Board, Dr. R.V. Verma, who was in charge of the Biodiversity Board, was a part of the committee. Dr. V.S. Vijayan was a part of the committee. There was no attempt to go and meet people of Western Ghats to get their perspective also, and to take them into confidence that this is for them and not for their to defeat their real estate interest. And I stop there by saying once again, thank you, Dr. Anil, your esteemed registrar, and your other dignitaries who are behind this organizing this webinar. We will go forward. I stopped this moving cases to implement the Gadgil report only because it is too expensive that more than 2,000 quarry owners are fighting in the other side. More than 2,000 quarry mining units are fighting in Kerala to defeat this report, and we have thoroughly restrained ourselves from further litigations because you know the strength of the mining industry and resort industry. And now the state of Kerala, even in the midst of this pandemic and flood, they have decided to cut and remove more than 2 lakh trees from Western Ghats, assigned lands in Western Ghats, and they have directed the district collectors to divert more forest lands from Idukki. This is a serious situation, and I request the law students who are interested in the subject may come forward to take up this mission forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for your input. I'm sure your views are spreading awareness on the that you have just shared with us. Moving on to our last panelist, Dr. Chinchure. I would like to ask you that there has been a lot of debate regarding the eco-sensitivity parties saying that the entire Western Ghats should be made into an eco-sensitive area. The entire region should be made into an eco-sensitive area because as of now, I think there is only 60% of it which is an eco-sensitive area. What do you think about, is it possible to make all of these, the entire area into an eco-sensitive area?
Thank you, Shubhankar. Am I audible now?
Yes, so it's echoing a bit, sir, but I can hear you.
Okay. Thank you, Shubhankar. Honorable Vice Chancellor, Dr. Dilip Uke sir, and Honorable Registrar, Professor Anil Warrier, and all the organizers of today's this panel discussion. And I appreciate for taking this particular topic for today's discussion.
Sir, I'm sorry to interrupt
you. My history.
So can you be a little more audible, a little more louder?
Hello.
Yes, now it's all right.
Yeah. Okay. I will just appreciate what the my co-esteemed panelists already said in the presentation. Before taking this particular question, whether to declare the demand that the entire Western Ghat should be declared as an eco-sensitive area. The significance of Western Ghat, as we all know, and in fact you pointed out in your introductory remark, that the Western Ghat is one among the 7 great mountain ranges in the country, and is next only to Himalayas. Its landscape is unique in terms of ecology and biodiversity.
Sir, sorry to interrupt you again. Sir, if you can try moving your headsets and then speaking, sir, because it's still echoing a lot.
Oh, is it? Okay, now is it okay? Hello?
So can you remove your headphones? Can you remove the headset from your device?
Hello?
It might be clearer.
Hello? Hello? Is it okay?
So unplug the headphones from your device. It would be a little, could be a little more audible.
I am unplugged it now. I am unplugged it now.
Sure, sir, it's better.
Okay. Okay. Please let me know if any technical glitches it appears. So let me talk on this particular issue now. See, as we all know that this Western Ghat geology and geology coupled with rainfall makes the Western Ghat as one of the most ecological diversified landscape. It is this biodiversity of Western Ghat that supports a wide range of forest types ranging from tropical wet evergreen forest to the grasslands. Some more than 4,000 species of flowering plants with high degree of endemism, rich fauna with endemism ranging from 11 to 78% among the different groups. Consequently, Western Ghats constitutes not only one of the hotspots of the biodiversity in the world, but also one among world's 8 hottest hotspots. The question which you have raised, that is, there is a demand to declare Western Ghat as an eco-sensitive area. See, in my opinion, the justification reasons would be, I have made some points regarding to declare this complete Western Ghat as an eco-sensitive area. Number one, I would say in the national interest. It is essential to protect the Western Ghats because extraordinary biodiversity richness is one of the reasons why India is incredible. Land area, India holds 7% flora and 6.5% fauna of the world. The second point, world 8th hottest biodiversity hotspot. As I already said, the Western Ghats mountain range that extends over more than 1,600 kilometers from river Tapi to Kanyakumari to the states of Gujarat, Maharashtra, Goa, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, and Kerala is one of the world's 8th hottest biodiversity hotspots. Then this Western Ghats typical conditions. The Ghats with average elevation of 600 meter force, that moisture-laden winds coming up the Arabian Sea to cause precipitation of 2,000 more, with western hill slopes receiving maximum rainfall, while the eastern slopes remaining comparatively drier. These typical conditions have evolved a wide range of habitat types like tropical evergreen forest, moist deciduous and dry deciduous forest, dry prone forest, plateaus and grasslands. The another unique feature is habitat for unique species. Around 5,000 species of plants, 500 bird species, 220 amphibians, 120 mammals is just a glimpse of special richness. The Ghats is a center of endemism with over 2,000 species of flora and fauna, found only in the Ghats, out of which 325 species are globally threatened, like lion-tailed macaw, Nilgiri thar, Malabar grey hornbill, to name a few. In fact, you already stated in your introductory remark that UNESCO recognizes the Western Ghats as World Heritage Site. Then the other point would be the lifeline for the biodiversity. There is an inherent relationship between forest and water. Forests serve to be natural sponges, collecting and filtering rainwater and releasing it slowly into 65 rivers that originate the flow through the Ghats, flowing to a lifeline for the biodiversity. And 15 million people, not only in the Ghats, but along with the West Coast and the Deccan Plateau. India is a country with one of the oldest civilizations, and we all know that a rich culture that respects and worships the natural resources. Like tree cutting and hunting are disallowed, no person dares to cut this system, is he be punished by Almighty. This aspect has been largely responsible for conserving forests and wildlife around area like Lord Sabrimala Temple in Periyar, Kerala and Lord Bhimashankar Temple in Maharashtra. Then the other point I would like to mention here, as the esteemed panel member already mentioned it, Professor Gadgil and Dr. Kasturirangan committee recommended declaring the entire Western Ghats landscape as ecologically sensitive area. Recognizing ecological, culture and economic values, Professor Gadgil and Dr. Kasturirangan committees constituted by the Government of India in 2011 and 2013 respectively recommended measures for long-term preservation of this ecologically fragile landscape. Professor Gadgil committee recommended declaring the entire Western Ghats landscape as an ecologically sensitive area. Now, in fact, we divided the three subzones with ban on mining, thermal power plants, polluting industries, and large dams, and the inclusion of local communities in biodiversity conservation and promoting eco-friendly activities. The Kasturirangan committee, which recommended green growth that promotes sustainable and equitable development, bringing only around 37% Ghats area under ecologically sensitive area out of entire 1,64,000 square meters. Then the another, like whether is it feasible? Of course, the central and state government role and to overcome vested interests. The central government like to bring the 3 draft notification for declaring this as a Western Ghats ecologically sensitive area. However, the poor response from the state governments have shown any support for the notification. In fact, in the Rajya Sabha Committee on Government Assurance expressed its dissent over the insensitive approach. The vested interests have misled the locals against the well-meaning recommendations of the report. Then, of course, the other is the sustainable development. India's economic policies and development should be built on a strong ecological foundation that ensure an environmentally sound and sustainable future to people and prevent extinction of many species of this beautiful landscape. So another important point, which in fact, when I was just listening to the video of Professor Gadgil, even he mentioned it, that asymmetry between necessities of local communities and corporate social responsibilities. High-intensity economic activities in the Western Ghats region has resulted in establishment of so many commercial organizations. These organizations conduct some welfare programs for the development of local communities under the corporate social responsibility scheme. These initiatives are not symmetry with the necessities of local communities. Instead of strengthening their core skills, these initiatives have diverted them from their traditional skills. The richness of biodiversity of Western Ghats and the activities taking place in eco-sensitive areas disturb the landscape in terms of ecology and biodiversity. To restore the biodiversity, I would say for the sustainable development, I will make some points like point number one is proactive eco-friendly policies to be framed and adopted. Then the second point would be the strengthening of legal regime. And of course, the last is effective implementation of environment impact assessment. This is another important point, like that is we should have an environment impact assessment. As we know that Article 51A of the Indian Constitution, which provides that protection of the environment is a fundamental duty of every citizen. Under Article 21, the scope of right to life includes a right to a clean environment. See, over the years, the central government has enacted various laws that are applicable to Western Ghats, like the Environmental Protection Act 1986, the Forest Conservation Act 1980, the Biodiversity Conservation Act 2002, and so on. However, these laws are not implemented efficiently, which makes me wonder if areas like the Himalayas and the Western Ghats, internationally significant ecosystem and biosphere reserve, need their own special laws. Additionally, India's water laws are inadequate. Existing legislation primarily focuses on pollution control, meaning the law has little to say about preventing or even managing floods, which result from mismanagement of dams or too much riverside development. The problem is enhanced in the cases of rivers that flows across the boundaries. Some of the major floods in the past couple of years happened after dams at a near full capacity in one district or state were open, letting water flow downstream into the another area. Recently, a draft dam safety bill has been proposed to address these problems. Similarly, discussion on climate change and environmental lawmaking should involve more grassroots level participation. For most people, poverty and earnings still matter more than climate mitigation or adaptation. Hence, people's perception should be molded to recognize and realize how deforestation or climate change impact their daily life. The Western Ghats are South India's lifeline, with millions dependent on the range either directly or indirectly. These mountains need protection. However, while new development in the region continues to be human-centric, the entire concept of nature preservation is elevated. To protect the Western Ghats, what we require is an attitude that recognizes the significance of the mountains and that will invoke specific law. This is what my first preliminary presentation on your question. The demand to declare entire Western Ghats as a eco-sensitive area. This is what over to Shubhankar now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for your input. Yes, sir. Thank you very much for your input. I'm sure the audience has had a lot to think about. Now, moving on to the question and answer sessions. Since we are already way past our time limit, we're going to only take a couple of questions. So a lot of participants have asked about the lack of initiative and commitment on the part of the government in safeguarding the Western Ghats. This has Dr. Vishnu, would you like to take this question?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Shubhankar, again, and thank you, Dr. Chinjure. Advocate Harish mentioned about the speech made by our former Prime Minister Indira Gandhi at the Stockholm conference in 1972. And of course, that is one of the historical speeches made by any state head so far. She said, as far as India is concerned, poverty is the greatest polluter. Poverty and absence of means are the greatest polluter. Now, essentially, she was trying to say that India needs to establish industries. We need to generate wealth, and only through generating wealth, creation of money, we can take care of. We can feed our people. We can take care of their health, and only thereafter we can emphasize on protecting the environment. And remember, this was made in 1972. Now, I'll just give you the glimpses of 3 reports. The first one is the 2018, I think it was 2018 or 19, Oxfam, one of the Oxfam study reports. Oxfam is a research organization based in UK. This report, it reveals that, one of the stark realities of India's income equality, the concentration of wealth. This report indicates that 1% of India's 1.3 billion population grossed almost 73% of the money generated in 2017 or 18. Okay. First point. Please, my next 2 points are also has to be read along with this. The second point is that the 2018 Global Hunger Index, it places India at the 100th position out of the 119 countries in terms of reduction of hunger. The second point. That means there is no distribution of wealth. The first point proves that there is no distribution of wealth. The second point proves that we have, what Prime Minister Indira Gandhi dreamed in 1972. That is, food for everyone. That is not achieved. And the third point, it is I think it was 2017 or 18, a report by the Lancet Commission on Pollution and Health. It says that India, pollution and health, okay, it says that India has the highest number of pollution related deaths in the world. So in 1972, our Prime Minister told the world that, see, our emphasis is on creating wealth, and after creating wealth, we will take care of, we will provide food and the health facilities for our population. Thereafter, we will concentrate on protecting the environment. Even in the year 2018-19, we are the world leaders in pollution related death. We are the world leaders in hunger related death. And we are the world leaders in a concentration of wealth, with a minority of our population. 1% of Indian population accumulated almost 73% of the money that has been generated in 2017-18. So what did we achieve? When we speak about political commitment, did we achieve the objective of industrialization and generation of wealth? We didn't. Did we succeed in protecting the environment? We didn't. What does it prove? I have no idea. One more point, the same line about our political commitment of enforcing the environmental law or any law for that matter. In the context of climate change, it was way back in 2019. Of course, a lot of changes have happened after that. It was the UPA government, and during those, it was during the Copenhagen Conference of Parties in 2019, and it was Mr. Jairam Ramesh who was the environmental minister. He made an observation in the parliament. Like the fundamental question was like, what will be India's commitment, India's stand at the Copenhagen Conference of Parties of UNFCCC. There he said, I have that on my screen, if I can read that. To quote him, when I took over as Minister of Environment and Forest, the Prime Minister's instructions to me were, India has not caused the problem of global warming, but try and make sure that India is part of the solution. Be constructive. Be proactive. Then I asked myself, what is India's position when it comes to international negotiations? The only position India had, our per capita is very low. Your per capita is very high. Therefore, we would not do anything. Then he continues, sir, he addresses the speaker. Sir, per capita is an accident of history. It so happened that we could not control our population. That is why we get the benefit of per capita. It is an important point because per capita is the only instrument of ensuring equitable distribution. But it cannot be the only point. So when I first started looking at the international canvas, I was struck by the fact that India's position was our per capita is low and therefore we are entitled to pollute more till we reach your per capita levels. Since you have caused the problem, you must fix the problem. And he made this speech. And I will not name the other members, but you can look at the parliamentary debates, which is an open access record. There was like even people from his own political party, people from all the other opposition the opposition parties vehemently attacked him. And finally, he lost his portfolio. He had to resign from the position of, his position of environmental ministry. Harish ji rightly pointed out. So when we speak about implementation of Gadgil Committee report, we are essentially competing with, or we are essentially challenging people who had accumulated or who had invested money in mining of minerals without following any ethical standards, through corrupt practices. And we are competing with the mafia who had invested in clearing our forest, cutting down timber and using them at their whims and fancies. We are competing with the people who are encroaching the forest land for their own private interest. They are wealthy people, and unfortunately, some of us are grossly, we cannot fight with them because sometimes money is really important. And so when we speak about the capacity of or the political will to implement Gadgil Committee report or political will of protecting the environment, generally, I should say that no. Maybe Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, she was an pro-environmental leader that we had. All of us remember about the enactment of the Forest Conservation Act and the constitutional amendment, and thereafter, the kind of opposition that she had to take from the various state leadership, because that was essentially seen as a challenge to federalism. And thereafter, we have we had only one Jairam Ramesh, and I cannot find any other political leaders who are committed to the protection of environment so far. Maybe we had one Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, and we had one Jairam Ramesh, and who else? I don't know. I haven't seen anyone. So a political commitment, I don't know. I don't think we have any political commitment towards our environment. But something that all of us have to understand, which is the appropriate model in the long run. By polluting the environment, through corrupt practices, by enacting a law that would facilitate corrupt practices, maybe.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we are a little short of time. Can you?
Thank you, Shubhankar. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
You can go ahead, Shubhankar.
Oh, okay, sir. Thank you. The next question that we have, also a lot of participants have asked, is what would be required in terms of legal reformation in order to improve the situation of the Western Ghats? What would Mr. Vasudev, could you please take this question? What do you think would be the recommendations that would be required in the legal reformation?
First thing is, to implement any instrument of law, you should identify what is Western Ghats. Western Ghats should be defined. It is not defined in any of the ecosystem ESA draft notifications. They only demarcated some village boundaries as Western Ghats eco sensitive areas. It is not. It should not be like that. Western Ghats should be defined. What is Western Ghats? Western Ghats is as equally important as the topmost point of Anamudi to the bottom point of some areas in Ernakulam near Kochi. So I'm saying is, definition of a particular thing is very, very important if you want to implement it without clashes. 2, identification of areas. This draft notification has to be thrown into dustbin. This draft notification will only protect already protected forest lands. Take the case of Kerala. They proposed only forest lands and some a few number of areas for a small area for non-forest areas. They are 2 government properties. None of the private properties are protected under ESA. Now, if you see the landslideness of a particular area, it is not depending upon the ownership, whether you are owning it, whether state is owning it, whether it is a forest land in the government records. It doesn't matter at all. Environmental parameters should be followed, not the ownership of the land should be followed. This is basic common sense. See, I don't know why High Courts and Supreme Court and the judges who are very equipped with the environmental jurisprudence are not looking into these parameters. I'm saying, for practical sense, if the landslide is happening in a particular area, we are categorizing that particular area as a sensitive area. It is not depending upon whether I am owning it, whether the state is owning it, whether it is under the control of Forest Department or my control. It is the physical parameters, it is the scientific parameters, geographical parameters that matters. Therefore, environmental parameters alone should be the criteria for this. To that extent, we have to challenge it. I think the Goa Foundation has taken a step to identify the original Western Ghats area with respect to Gadgil Committee report. It is pending before the Honorable Supreme Court. Several students, minor students, have approached the Supreme Court for implementation of that the same. And I am seriously asking all the law students to follow the regulatory bodies. Strict follow taking follow-ups from the regulatory bodies and asking them to correct themselves will solve the problem. I'm sad to say that day before yesterday, appeal number 21 was listed before the National Green Tribunal Chennai bench. Chennai bench is sitting for 5 states. You must be knowing. These from the 5 states, from the 50,000 environment clearances granted within a year, now we are in the month of September. Only 21 environment clearances have been challenged before the National Green Tribunal. Any citizen can challenge an environment clearance granted if wrong. Any student or any lawyer can read the minutes of the State Environment Impact Assessment Authority or the Ministry of Environment and see whether the proper scientific assessment has been done or not. And even a white paper application appeal against an environment clearance granted can be done. I have been doing this in 2013 and 14 and all. But what I'm saying is, nowadays, even the challenges are very less. The National Green Tribunal is not at all serious in appeals. They are barred by limitation. And last point, we should increase the penalty from the nominal penalty, which is now being imposed under Section 19. Now, people have a choice. Unlike other acts, in the Environment Protection Act, if you see, Form 4 can be used. Any citizen can start prosecution. Not only the persons who are interested, like district collector or pollution control board. If they are not acting, you can act. You can step into the shoes of the district collector and start penalizing, start initiating, taking cognizance of the matter of environmental violations. Now, I have seen only 3 cases initiated by our office in state of Kerala, and less than 4 cases have been registered under Environment Protection Act for the past 35 years. If the act is not working, who is going to bother about the act? If IPC is written or passed by the parliament and no police stations are acting on that behalf, who is bothered about IPC? Like that, environmental laws are only in papers. No penal provisions are initiated under Water Act, Air Act or Environment Protection Act in the state of Kerala. I don't know about the other states, but I'm sure that the Tamil Nadu and Karnataka are also charging less than 100 cases for the past 35 years. So who is going to implement it? The implementation authority should be strictly pressurized by the people like us who know the law. I think that is one way of looking at it.
Thank you very much, sir, for your response. With this, we end the question answer session, and I'd like to apologize to the participants if we couldn't take all your questions, but we do have a session with Professor Madhav Gadgil coming soon, and we intend to pose all the questions asked over here to him on that day. I now request the program coordinator, Gauri Rani, who is a teaching and research assistant at the university, to present the vote of thanks and conclude the session.
Thank you, Shubhankar. Am I audible to you, Shubhankar?
Yes, you're audible. Please go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So extremely sorry that we have a little bit exceeded your time, and I'm just going to take 10 minutes. And firstly, before I begin, I would like to take this opportunity to wish a very happy Teachers' Day to my teachers and my gurus, Professor Dr. Dilip Uke sir, who is the Vice Chancellor of MNLU Mumbai, and Professor Dr. Anilji Varyat sir, who is the Registrar at in our university. And also a very happy Teachers' Day to all the panelists and the professors who have joined as the participants in today's event. So I've been getting this question a lot as to how we have come up with this whole idea of conducting panel discussion on this topic. Since our registrar sir is also a chair professor, he has not shared with you his personal contribution which he has made in this particular topic. Is that our registrar sir personally, along with his law students, conducted a research by visiting in the regions which were declared as the eco-sensitive areas in Kerala. And they submitted its report to the government of Kerala, The team and their work were appreciated by the government of Kerala. The speaker, the forest minister, had personally invited the team and appreciated their work, and the Administrative Reforms Commission had asked to carry them forward the work by conducting more such discussion over such crucial topic. Now the registrar Anil sir and me both belong to the regions that are from the Western Ghat regions. Sir is from Kerala and I'm from the Konkan region. And time and again we were having this conversation and the discussion over the threat to the biodiversity of Western Ghat regions. And we thought we really need to expand the discussions horizon by taking in the views and the opinions from the experts themselves. So like Anil sir had mentioned in the welcome address that Dr. Madhav Gadgil sir was really looking forward to join the panel discussion, for which he had personally told me that he had made a presentation to enlighten our participants about the whole thing about this environmental issue in the Western Ghat areas. And he believes that there really needs to be a social does exist, and that can only happen after creating awareness by one is by conducting such discussions. I may not be the right person to conclude today's session since I'm no expert in environmental issues or the environmental laws, but as a person who belongs to the Konkan region, which comes under the Western Ghats, I'm aware about the issue that exists and understand the importance of making everyone aware about it. The landscape of the Western Ghats has been changing over the years. Once pristine mountains, these forests are under tremendous pressure from growing human population. There has been deforestation, unsustainable extraction of resources, and altered rainfall patterns. As Vishnu Kunrayar sir mentioned in today's speech, that the Western Ghats has economic significance. The Gadgil Panel Commission had also recommended to control on mineral extraction and mining in the Western Ghat regions. So in Kerala itself, there are approx 5,000 quarries, of which are only approximately 1,000 which are the licensed ones. And the first and the foremost recommendation of the Gadgil committee was to stop functioning of these illegal quarries. Then the Gadgil committee also recommended on illegal constructions in the ecologically fragile areas, that these should be restricted and all the activities that damage the environment should be stopped. However, unfortunately, it was rejected and overlooked, claiming it to be too eco-friendly. And again in 2019, the Kerala government recalled the Gadgil committee report after the devastating floods, which we all are aware of, and the tragedies due to the landslides in the state. In which almost 12 districts were badly affected, and we cannot ignore the fact that there has been global warming and it is having its impact not just on the Western Ghats but all over the world. And the warning signs are all there. The monsoon patterns are definitely changing, and the irregular monsoon has become the new norm for India. So the situation we may be facing in the coming times, maybe the dry period, that is the long period of drought, or on the other hand, the extreme rainfall, which we are all witnessing now. So despite the natural disasters like the floods and the landslides in these areas, there is yet no significant action that has been taken by the government. As stated by Advocate Harish Vasudevan sir, it's true that the legal instrument alone cannot save Western Ghats, or for that matter, any environmental issue. There needs to be contribution from the part of the citizens and also the leaders and the representatives of people. Even Dr. Madhav Gadgil sir, in his recommendation, was the opinion that no new laws were required to be protected to protect the environment. Existing laws which we have, they need to be strictly implemented. As Harish Vasudevan sir mentioned, there needs to be a separate legal regime and administrative action to determine the eco-sensitive areas. Coming to the Dr. Anand Chinchure sir's speech, sir, it was not clearly audible for all the participants, but thank you for all the participants for cooperating with us. I would request sir to send the soft copy of the speech and we will share it with all our participants. With that, I conclude today's online panel discussion, and I'll go ahead with the vote of thanks. As the program coordinator of today's panel discussion on the topic of eco-sensitivity of Western Ghats, revisiting the Gadgil committee report, I deem it as a great honor and privilege to propose the vote of thanks to every individual who has played some role in making today's event a success. To begin with, I'm extremely thankful and grateful to our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Sir Professor Dilip Uke, for the continuous support and who actually guided the entire team in conducting the event that's covering the environmental laws. Even he believes that it is the most overlooked subject, but even during the most difficult time, we need to continue discussing and voicing our opinions on the environmental issues which actually are directly affecting the livelihood of human beings. Further, I may like to express sincere thanks to our registrar, respected Professor Dr. Anilji Varyat sir, for encouraging and supporting the team of Environmental Law Chair. And I hope it's safe to say that all our conversation on the topic of eco-sensitivity of Western Ghats region have been fruitful today. I would like to thank particularly our Assistant Registrar Academics, Mr. Sajid Sheikh sir, who has taken up the role of managing the whole event for Environmental Law Chair and for providing the team with perfect logistic support. Further, I'm extremely thankful to all our esteemed panelists, without whom today's online panel discussion wouldn't have been possible. With your expertise and knowledge, we managed to have such insightful and informative session on the topic, which is hardly discussed or spoken about in the legal field and in general. So this one's for the team of Environmental Law Chair. We have been fortunate enough to be backed by the team of very motivated and dedicated students who are very result oriented. One of them is Shubhankar Mathur. Thank you for moderating today's online panel discussion at its best. And definitely last but not the least, all the participants who have given such great and overwhelming response to our first ever virtual session conducted by ML Pense, Environmental Law Chair of MNLU Mumbai. Going ahead, we will be conducting more events to create general awareness about existing threats to the nature in today's time, vis-a-vis the need for the implementation of the existing laws and the rules, and also on the topics wherein we believe that there are some legal reforms that needs to be brought in pertaining to environmental laws. Feedback form link is sent to you in the chat box. Only after filling the feedback form, you will be issued the certificates within a week's time. With this, I close today's session. Thank you everyone once again, and good luck for your future endeavors. Thank you.
Thank you so much for everyone.